You got a gun, you got a big gun, you got a gun, it's not a real one, and all you ever think about is running away, all you ever think about is trying to stay away from me.
And welcome back to another episode of the LoudMouth MMA podcast. I am your host, Kyle Steele. This week, or shall I say today, we have another addition to our MMA Yesterday series. This time it is UFC 10. We have ourselves a couple firsts in UFC 10.
It's a big first.
And I am stoked. I am excited.
It's a good one.
Yeah, a couple firsts in here.
Making up for the last one, too.
Yes,
Jeez.
well, not the least of which, let's just start right up front. If you listen to the UFC 9 episode, you're aware that we were not the biggest fans of that card. And it to no fault of the UFC zone, really. It's just...
And nobody
it
is.
was just a bad... it was a bad time.
Yeah.
This time, much better.
It's the
much
It's
better
the
round.
beginning of some bad times, really, but we had a little light here in this one.
This was good. This was this was a pretty good little card, man.
Yeah.
Overall, I really liked it. I am trying to figure out, and I was hoping it would be here, because of the timing that we're recording this. I do not have my notes guy. My notes guy was not able to get me anything.
We're going to have to go old school today.
We have to go old school. So the problem is, I desperately want to know who that person was who was commentating with them that had the word balls get bleeped.
Oh, yeah.
Who was it?
Anybody who gets in here's got some serious beep.
Yeah, it has some serious beep, and it gets beeped. And you know that he said balls.
You can't say balls on pay-per-view, bro.
But what was weird is that it gets bleeped, and then there's like silence, and like the camera pans, and then all of a sudden it's Bruce Beck going, "All right, we take a look back in the octagon." I mean, they didn't address it, they didn't whatever.
Weird hiccup.
It's bizarre.
It's
it was a
weird.
weird little hiccup to have this far into the game. And I can't figure out for the life of me why saying balls would be a big deal. Anyway,
Especially when people are getting punched in the face and bleeding all over the place right in front of you.
But my guess is that that's the problem. That's the problem. They're trying to continue to clean up the sport.
We can punch them in the balls. We cannot say balls, though.
Okay, let me look around. They could say balls, but I get it. Like, it's just weird. It's just an odd little thing. It was just weird. The future name attorney, as well as two alternate bouts. I was trying to see if I was looking on the Wikipedia page just to try to see if they said anything about who was in the commentating booth, and I don't see anything.
At least we didn't hear from our buddy Dragon.
Don Wilson wasn't there, but whoever that guy wasn't great to begin with.
Not the greatest improvement.
No. All right, let me give you guys the relevant information. Of course, UFC 10, the tournament is coming back. So for UFC 9, the tournament style that we've grown accustomed to, UFC 1 through 8, disappeared for UFC 9. Now it's back.
Good tournament, man. This was a good one.
This was a good one. Date July 12th, 1996. This was at the Fairgrounds Arena in Birmingham, Alabama, baby.
The State Fairgrounds.
State Fairgrounds.
That's a big venue.
Attendance, 4,300. Very, very low attendance. Buy rate, 96,000.
Yeah, you can tell from those
which
numbers.
Which is really low.
We're hitting the dark ages.
96,000 is low. That's the buy. I think that has to be the lowest to date.
Yeah.
I'm almost positive.
Yeah.
And it's because I believe that John McCain was very successful in getting a bunch of pay-per-view providers to pull this.
Yeah, you're absolutely right.
And
he
I'm
had
pretty
a bunch
sure
of networks pull this.
And I'm pretty sure that's why this number is so low, although I'm not positive.
Not only was he successful in getting networks to pull it off a pay-per-view, but he was successful in getting states to not host the events.
Yeah. This was originally supposed to take place in the Providence Civic Center in Providence, Rhode Island, but I believe they banned it.
Yep.
So it kept it from going there. They either banned it or there was an issue. I don't exactly know why it didn't happen in Rhode Island. I'm just assuming that Rhode Island banned it.
It probably wasn't anything good.
No, I doubt it was an issue with the venue, because why would it be? And Alabama is so dramatically different than Rhode Island that there had to have been some issue that they're just like, all right, fuck it, let's just change courses entirely. What's the opposite of Rhode Island? Alabama. Okay, sure. That sounds about right.
Call them up.
Give them a call. So that's where they wound up. That's pretty much all the information for that. Our first fight of the night was Gary Goodrich taking on John Campatella.
Yeah.
Campatella?
That was that humongous dude, wasn't it?
Was he the dude that was yoked out of his absolute mind?
He was so big. Holy crap.
It didn't even make any sense.
He looked like a bodybuilder in there. He didn't look like a fighter or a wrestler.
No.
He looked like a straight-up bodybuilder.
And it didn't look like... So, like, Mark Coleman makes his debut on this card. We're going to talk about him plenty.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, makes his debut on this card. He... Ken Shamrock is similar.
They're all jacked, but they're
all
kind of jacked.
This guy was different.
Yes.
He looked like a bodybuilder.
He looked like fucking Pujanowski out there.
It's not, being a bodybuilder and being really, really strong is not the same thing.
Yeah.
It's not the same thing.
Not at all. They do not equate.
No. He had muscles in places that didn't look useful.
Yeah.
Like,
when
if
you're
that makes
big,
sense.
You can't turn your punches over. You can't throw high kicks. I mean,
Right.
you're limiting so much of much fighting technique from yourself.
Yeah, exactly. And was that seriously the first fight of the night? Why did I remember? I remembered Crazy Hair being the first fight of the night. But it doesn't matter. This is the way it's listed.
Oh, yeah, Mortal
This is
Kombat
the way
guy.
it's listed on my bracket, so I'm just going to go in this order. But this order doesn't seem right to me. Because why would they put Gary first? I don't know. It doesn't matter.
I think you might be right. I think Spaghetti did fight first.
I'm pretty sure too, but whatever. It doesn't matter. All right, moving on up, we have Mark Coleman taking on Moti Horenstein. I don't know if I'm pronouncing the first name right, but I'm definitely pronouncing the last name right. Horenstein. This is just an example of... So this is Mark Coleman's debut fight, okay? And this is a big deal because Mark Coleman would go on... I don't want to say too much because that's not what this podcast is, but Mark Coleman goes on to have quite a bit of success.
Let's cover a couple little bullet points really quick.
Please, go ahead.
The godfather of ground and pound, Hall of Famer, and the first ever UFC heavyweight champion. I don't think we really need to say anything else.
Yeah, I mean, there you go. I mean, it's and you can tell in watching this, and obviously when we get to the end here, spoiler alert, he wins it all, right?
Also from Ohio State, which I don't know if you know much about us, but
yeah, he actually lives in Hillard, Ohio.
Yeah, that's not far from us. We're in Dayton,
It's
Ohio.
not. It's I looked it up. I will explain at a later date why I know this information, but I looked it up, and from my house to his is less than an hour.
Oh, that's crazy.
So, yep. So
not far away.
No, it's close enough that you could take some recording equipment and sit down and have a conversation. Ooh. Okay. So you can tell that Mark Coleman's going to be something special. It's very, very obvious.
Yeah, it's super apparent.
As soon as he get now, I'll say without knowing who he is, because I knew like this is one of the first guys that I'm like, I know who that is. You know what I mean? Like I'm very familiar with what he represents and what he does. I will say if I'm being objective and I'm placing myself in those stands at UFC 10, not knowing who this guy was, when you first look at him, I think you go, okay, it's just another meathead.
Yeah, maybe.
Just another meathead.
I mean, he looked the part.
Then you hear his accolades, and you go, okay, so he's a legitimate wrestler. Wrestling is not going to do anything in a sport like this. Yeah, sure, you had Mark Schultz beat Gary Goodrich, but whatever. He was also, his limping to fox catcher, right? He has all these things that you're like, nah, I mean, maybe that just worked against Gary, but like wrestling's not going to do anything.
Wrestling's not going to do anything. Mark Coleman, hold my beer, buddy.
Yeah, I mean, and that's what I'm saying. He looks like it would have been easy to dismiss him. It looks like it would have been easy to be like, oh yeah, he's a good wrestler.
And you could not have made a bigger mistake in that
I wonder,
day.
I'm interested in talking to a guy like Keith. I've mentioned him all the time on the podcast. So guys, when I talk about Keith, I'm referencing Keith Schillen. He runs MMAtakeover.com. Go to the MMAtakeover.com. He runs the website over there. He's been a very, very, very big fan of the sport going back to these days. I believe his first event was UFC 6. So, I mean, he's a guy that's been here and done this. Anytime I have questions, I call him up. Also, again, I want to give another shout out to John Franklin with MMA Today for being an incredible historian as well and putting together packets for me. I don't have one for this card because we're doing this back to back and didn't even tell him I was doing this. So, but I'll get a packet for UFC 11 so that way I have it to reference. But anyway, Keith is the type of guy that I would love to ask this question to, and I'm sure he'll text me when he's listening. did people know what they had in Mark Coleman before he fought? Like, what were people expecting from him? Now, Keith was a wrestler.
That's interesting.
So my guess is that he probably thought wrestlers would be successful. But I don't know. I'm interested in what mainstream people thought
What the
that
everyman
wrestlers
thought, yeah.
would be able to do. Like good collegiate or Olympic wrestlers. Like, what were they going to be able to do? Because even now, it's 2000. We're recording this in 2018, whenever you're listening to it. We're recording this in 2018. People still underestimate wrestling in MMA.
And
still
it's-
to this day.
and it's the
this was 20 years ago.
It's the most effective martial art in mixed martial arts.
That's what I'm saying.
too.
This was 20 years ago.
It's crazy.
So if people misunderstand wrestling now and underestimate it now, I can only imagine 22 years ago what they thought of it. So I don't know. It's an interesting thing. People genuinely do not understand what they're getting with wrestling. And I don't know why. It's bizarre to me that people still underestimate it. I still listen to people talk about guys like Colby Covington, who are really big right now. Again, I don't know when you're listening to this, but it's 2018. Colby Covington is still a big name in the UFC and stuff. And people still act like he's just going to lose all these fights because he doesn't have any, because he can't strike.
He's one-dimensional.
He doesn't need to strike. That's the whole point.
Look at Ben Askren.
I know.
Ben Askren barely threw a punch in his whole career.
Yeah, I mean, it's people still just don't really get it. So I don't know. I'm interested. That's a good question to have about this. But anyway, Mark Coleman comes in there, mops the floor with the dude. It wasn't even a competition. It wasn't even a fight.
Ugly ground and pound.
Yes.
Vintage Mark Coleman.
Yeah. All right, let's move on to Brian Johnston taking on Scott Felder or Fieldler. What do we say about old Scott? Okay, so Scott comes out. I'm going to try to describe him. First of all, I want you to Google the name. Let me tell you how to spell it. Scott, spell it how you think it is. Okay, and then it's Fiedler.
Make sure you add UFC 10 in your Google search just so you can see him at this event.
Fiedler, and then Google UFC 10. I'm going to do it right now. UFC 10, Scott. Let me look it up.
He looks kind of like a cross between like Goro from Mortal Kombat
And Spaghetti. If you know who Spaghetti is.
Spaghetti.
There it is. Holy Jesus. Look at that.
That hair is beautiful.
I don't know whose idea this was. I don't know if this was I don't know anything about the guy.
It's literally a mullet with a shaved head. I mean, he shaved every bit of his head except for the mullet in the back.
But then the mullet in the back is braided. So it's not like a straight down mullet.
And
it's braided.
And it's big.
It's bizarre.
It's a big patch of
the
hair.
ugliest, weirdest looking hair. And the thing is, when he's on the ground, it's just this big patch of hair that's in the back, and it looks like a wig. But then, like a wig where you chop off the front, it's bizarre.
It's weird.
It's bizarre looking, and I know. I mean, that should say what happened in this fight. That this is what we're talking about. It wasn't a boring fight. The first three fights weren't competitions. This one wasn't either.
Yeah.
I mean, this was the most competition out of the other two, but that's not saying much.
Yeah, Fiedler got beat up, if that's how you say his name, I think. Yeah, he got beat the fuck up.
I mean, it's just... Because the thing is he loses. Brian Johnston beats him. Mm-hmm. So it's like, if that hair looks stupid before, look how stupid it looks when you lose, and you're being like, oh shit, I lost, and you have this dumb hair in the back of your head like flopping around.
I knew I shouldn't have listened to my manager. Cut all my hair off.
It was so weird. It's almost like he was cutting his hair off and like, no, you have to leave some hair on because that's how you generate power. And he's like, oh shit, all right, we'll just braid this. It was weird. It's so bizarre.
I don't get it.
So between the first three fights, first fight lasted 1:28, second fight lasted 2:43, third fight lasted 2:25. They just weren't much of competitions. I mean, really.
They were fun to watch.
They were fun to watch.
Yeah, they were quick.
All right, let's move into Don Fry taking on Mark Hall. Got to give Mark Hall credit where credit is due. So Mark Hall is the guy famously in UFC 9 that knocked out broke the sumo wrestler's nose while Mark Hall was being slammed to the ground.
Yeah.
Basically, he's getting lifted up by a sumo wrestler, and as he's being slammed, he lands a right and just cracks the dude's nose. Blood just everywhere. Blood goes everywhere.
Nasty nose break.
Nasty nose break. So anyway, he's back now, next event, and he's fighting Don Fry, which Poor guy.
The dude is tough, though, man. Like, I did not realize how tough
If
that
he
guy
was fighting Brian Johnston, he would have won, I think. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I mean, I think he would have been fine, and he would have gone to the finals and lost to either Coleman or Fry anyway.
Yeah.
But nevertheless, he would have at least made it into the semifinals.
But, man, he hung in there for a while. He took
did.
a fucking
10 minutes,
beating.
10 minutes and 21 seconds,
and
baby.
it was all beating.
It was a beating.
Yeah, there was no downtime in there. Don just beat the crap out of him the whole time.
I mean, listen, the more the announcers are talking about heart, the worse that you did. You know?
Yeah.
It's like the more times they say the word heart.
Oh, he's got a lot of heart. That
means
means
he's getting the shit kicked out of him.
Yeah.
And that's what was happening. They kept talking about his heart.
Yeah.
Not like his heart isn't like his cardio, but like they're like, hey, this guy's all heart. Like, yeah, that's it.
Well, he's certainly no offense.
Yeah, all heart might be. You might be implying exactly what you mean. Anything else for the quarterfinals that's jumping out at you?
Nah, man, those were all pretty quick fights, pretty brutal fights.
All right, so we have the semifinals. We have Mark Coleman taking on Gary Goodrich. That was the second fight. Let's start the first fight. We have Don Fry taking on Brian Johnston.
Yeah, not much time to rest.
Yeah, we have Don Fry taking on Brian Johnston. So, same thing here. It wasn't much of a competition.
Yeah, just Don beating him up, man.
I mean, more so than Don's first opponent, Mark Hall.
Yeah, definitely.
Or he did worse than him is what I meant to say. Sorry. I mean, he looked bad.
Yeah, it did not look good for him.
That's why I would have rather seen Mark Hall. I would have rather seen the Don Fry Mark Hall fight in the semifinals, because at least that was a better fight. Those are two guys that at least belonged there, and I'd have rather the Don Fry Brian Johnston fight to have taken place in the quarters.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I wish we could have flipped those.
Interesting.
Wish we could have flipped those, because I think Mark Hall just had a bad draw, man. Like, he kind of wins the first fight in very weird fashion. He fought. So here's Mark Hall's kind of pedigree here. He fights Harold Howard at UFC 7, loses to Paul Varelans at UFC 7. He's on Ultimate 95, where he gets a win, doesn't lose, and basically he loses to UFC 10 to Don Fry, and then has he fights in Ultimate Japan. Japan? Is that the UFC Japan?
Yes.
Ooh, that's a 96. That's coming up, baby.
It's coming up pretty soon. I think it's like 17.
That's coming up.
Yeah, we're getting there.
Well, that's November of 96. And UFC 10 was July of 96. Is that the next event?
No, okay, then yeah, there's no way.
Then what is that? What's
The next
Japan?
I think the next event after 10 is another Ultimate.
Ultimate 96?
I think so.
So Ultimate 96 is December 7th, 1996. So I don't know. I'm interested in what this Japan is. It must not be UFC Japan. That must be something different.
Yeah, maybe.
But anyway, spoiler, he loses to Don Fry there again. So, poor guy. Just keeps drawing a bad card. But yeah, I would have liked to have seen that in the semis, because I think that was clearly a better fight anyway. Yeah. Brian Johnston had no business being in there. Moving on down, we have Mark Coleman taking on Gary Goodrich.
Can you imagine Coleman versus Mark Schultz in this day? Good Lord. I'm just thinking about all these old dream matchups.
I think Coleman would have won.
I do too. But
it just has to do with size, I think. I think Schultz would have been pretty
if it came
undersized.
down to just wrestling pedigree, man, it's hard to say.
Right?
I mean, you got to give it to Coleman with ground and pound and punching technique overall, striking technique overall. But
you have to give it to Coleman as far as MMA is concerned.
Yeah.
I mean, he's definitely more equipped to be fighting MMA.
But wrestling, man.
But wrestling, I think it would have been
that'd be a hell of
probably
a
a stalemate at some point. I will get told I'm wrong, I'm sure, by a couple people, but I don't know. I don't know enough about wrestling or enough about those guys' true pedigree and who they fought and their careers.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I don't know all that information to really be able to form an opinion about it. But you definitely would have to say that Mark Coleman is the more well-rounded martial artist.
Yeah.
Certainly.
I'm just waxing over here anyway.
There'd really be no, yeah. But anyway, the way this fight ends is exhaustion. Either it's exhaustion or because that's what it's labeled as.
Yeah.
It was able to submission by exhaustion, or Gary. Here's what happens. Gary gets the shit kicked out of him for 7 minutes.
Yeah.
And finally, Mark Coleman gets on his back and flattens his body out.
And as soon
as he goes
happens-
flat, he taps. Gary taps.
So
either it was submission by exhaustion or it was Gary saying, like Pardo. Remember when Pardo?
Yep.
Yeah.
I'm cool.
As soon as he got mounted, he just tapped.
He knew he didn't have the energy to get out.
No,
of it.
he
didn't want to
gets
take
flattened out and he
elbows
goes,
to the head.
no. Just call it a day. I don't want to get fucking elbow in the back of the head. Like, just call it a day.
Smart move.
Yeah.
I mean,
Good for Gary.
That tired, that long into the fight with that type of guy on your back, it's not looking good.
Good for him, man. I'm glad that he showed intelligence there to be like, I'm not going to get out of this.
It always makes me happy to see such warriors have the frame of mind to know when they've had enough.
Yeah. All right, before we get into the finals, why have we not mentioned who made their debut?
Oh, I do.
Are you
not
kidding
know.
me?
Yeah,
we literally just skipped over like the most important thing about
we're
this
out
card.
of our mind. It's time.
It's time, baby. Bruce Buffer
making his debut.
In UFC 10. How have we not mentioned this yet?
I don't know.
That's crazy.
The fights were too good.
So there's two big debuts here. Mark Coleman, obviously, and Bruce Buffer.
Yeah.
Two very, very big, very, very important debuts.
It was so crazy seeing young Buffer up there making his debut.
He looks uncomfortable.
Tight and stiff.
He looks stiff.
Yep.
He's not moving around at all.
And think about what he is now, what he represents now. He's the best ever in my opinion.
Do you know how much better? I mean, unless you've seen UFC 10, like you don't realize how good his voice is.
Yeah.
Because in watching UFC 10, he kind of just sounds like any other guy.
Yeah.
Honestly.
That being said, it's still better
than Nathan
G-Man.
McGoins was doing.
Yeah.
And then they had another guy in there one time.
Who wasn't bad, but yeah, I can't remember that guy's
I don't remember
name
that
now.
guy's name, but he was only in there like once.
Yeah.
Michael Buffer clearly was better at this time period, but I would rather have Bruce now.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Of course,
Like
now, yeah.
you give me Michael Buffer in his prime and you give me Bruce Buffer right now,
Bruce.
I would take Bruce any day.
Yeah, no question.
No question. I think that
Especially for this sport.
yeah, man, it works. And
Yeah.
and he really clearly has taken the time to hone his craft.
Yeah, he's a
clearly,
master.
clearly. So I don't know, man. It's pretty cool.
Yeah.
It's pretty cool.
Big milestone.
Yeah.
Yeah. Probably a bigger milestone than Coleman.
Mm-hmm.
Just in terms of, how long the sport's been around, what it is today.
Yeah.
That he's still around, that he's as good as he is.
Yeah.
It's just crazy. Everybody knows Bruce.
Uh-huh.
Everybody.
Agreed. Anything else that we're forgetting? I just want to make sure we don't move on. To the two big debuts, of course, Mark Coleman and Bruce Buffer. But there's nothing else, right?
We did have another milestone in this event. Not such a big milestone, but this was the first card where two guys fought with MMA gloves on.
True. It's it's like I'm not 100% sure.
I'm
pretty sure.
It's like 99.9% sure that this is it.
So in the finals, it's Mark Coleman and Don Fry,
And they've both got MMA
and they
gloves
both
on.
have MMA gloves.
Yep.
Right? I mean, this is the first
think
time.
it's the
I'm
one.
almost positive.
Yeah.
So I was thinking Tank and Severn when they fought, because Tank wore gloves from moment one.
But I specifically
me
remember
too.
that celebration. He stands up off a tank and
Yep.
he throws his hands up in the air.
Me too.
Yeah.
Me too. So, yeah, I'm pretty sure this is the first time, which
Crazy.
is crazy to
What a
think.
milestone.
Yeah, what an interesting little milestone. There's something else I was thinking, and I forgot it, that there's kind of a weird little milestone here, but I don't remember what I was thinking. So let's talk Mark Coleman, Don Fry, shall we?
Yes, please.
Very, very good fight. I felt horrible for Don because he was dead to the world.
They both walked out there looking like they had no gas in the tank, but Mark had some reserves or something.
It's
that
nuts.
He just
and Mark had fought more recently and longer.
Yeah.
Going into the finals.
Yeah, he was the most recent semifinal fight going
and
into the
the
finals.
fight went a couple minutes longer.
Yep.
So it's like
that wrestling gas tank is no
it's a
joke.
nuts, man. It's nuts.
No joke.
It's continuing to remind you in the interview with Mark, I mean, he says this, that none of these guys understood what cardio meant. None of these guys truly understood it.
Yeah.
Chemo says it in his interview
UFC 3.
after UFC. He says it in his interview right before their super fight, the event before it. It must have been UFC 7 or so. I don't remember exactly. But anyway, he says it, and he goes, yeah, because they asked him, like, what's one thing you've learned? He goes, cardio.
Yeah.
Cardio. I mean, all these guys, Ken Shamrock acknowledged it in one of those post-fight interviews.
What's crazy to me is that in 2018, that's still one of the biggest, that's just one of the biggest things for any fighter. Like, if they're not conditioned, they're not going to make it.
Listen.
Then or now. You're not going to make it if you don't have exceptional fitness.
Listen, you take cardio away from Nick and Nate, they're not in the UFC.
Yeah.
I mean,
That's their biggest weapon.
The only reason why they are successful, basically, is crazy cardio and just toughness. I mean, just otherworldly levels of toughness and cardio.
The expression "fatigue makes cowards of men" exists for a reason.
Yeah, man. You start getting tired, and you can't think clearly. You're getting scared easier. Like,
Yep.
you're just like, I'm done. I have to get off of me. But anyway, these two guys, man, were just gassed to the fucking moon.
And neither one of them wanted to quit.
No, and Don he barely could lift his arms.
He got so beat by Mark too. Like, it was so nasty, that ground and pound he was landing.
I mean, that's a milestone in this event in and of itself. It's Don Fry's first loss.
Yeah.
And he would then go on. Again, I know we're trying to do this too much on the podcast. We're looking too far ahead. But go to Don Fry's page.
You're gonna have to look really far ahead to find his next loss after this one.
It's 10 plus fights.
Yeah,
I mean, he doesn't lose again for a hot minute.
It's like in the Pride 20s.
Yeah, I mean,
It's a while.
He doesn't lose again for a hot minute.
Yeah.
So Mark Coleman is legit, and
As legit as they come.
I'm really truly excited to see him moving forward.
Yes.
Like, honestly, I'm so excited to see him moving forward. I have not seen all of his fights, so I'm very excited to kind of go on this journey of witnessing. Especially for me, I'm such a big wrestling fan in MMA. I love these really good wrestlers.
Yeah.
It's one of my favorite things that's happening right now. And I think part of me loves it just because, again, people just don't understand it. People still just don't understand it, and they underestimate it. So I'm just like, I want to, it makes me like it more.
How many times have you been to B-dubs watching fights or something in your life, and they're wrestling, and you'll hear a guy,
boring.
you'll hear a guy in the background say, "Why doesn't he just get up?"
That's the point.
Don't you think he wants to, dummy?
Yeah, that's the point. All right, what else? Oh, shit. Hit my knee on it. I don't think there's anything else, man. There was another thing that I wanted to say was a milestone here, and I'm gonna forget, and I'm gonna remember it right when we get off.
As soon as you roll the music.
As soon as I hit music, I'm gonna remember what it is, or as soon as we're done recording, I'm like, that's what it was. But there was something else that was jumping out at me as being like kind of a milestone that we hadn't really seen before. So, Bruce Buffer, MMA gloves,
Coleman,
which is funny.
Yep.
Mark Coleman. That's it. That's all I can think of. I was going to try so hard, and I just couldn't do it.
If we remember, we'll talk about it on the next episode.
All right. Anything you want to plug before we get on out of here, man?
Now you guys know where to find the little young man.
It's Hitchcock.
Hitchcock 87.
All right, buddy. That's pretty much all I got. Thanks, guys. Make sure to tune into MMA Today. It's MMA-today.com. These episodes get posted there. It's a great website. So go check it out. That's all I got.